Hey, from the studios of TLC Talk Radio, welcome to A Vibrant Mix with Tasha, Tamiko, and Fred. Don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at the handle A Vibrant Mix. I am your girl, Tasha, here without my fabulous co-host. So if you are watching this video, you're probably wondering, Fred and Tamiko look very different. Today, we have a great show lined up for you. Our in-studio guests are pastors Dr. Eric Clopton of Cosmopolitan Community Church and Pastor VeRita Quinn of Remnant Ministries. And one of the things that we talk about a lot on our show is mental health. And no, we're not normally just teasing Fred. We are encouragers of people to seek treatment if something traumatizes them. And unfortunately, in our community, a lot of times that is frowned upon. We come from the old school, don't share your business. But we want to talk about grief counseling, which is very important to any community, but particularly in the African American community. And Pastor Clopton and I, full disclosure, he's my cousin, brother, pastor. We just experienced something that was very traumatic in the loss of our uncle, the patriarch of our family, and it was completely unexpected. He wasn't ill. It was we saw him one week, and the next week we saw him in a different state. So again, welcome to the show, pastors. How y'all doing?
We're doing wonderful.
Good.
Doing great.
All right.
I'm blessed and getting better.
All right. I'm down with that. I am
Right on.
absolutely down with that. So there's a new grief ministry that is starting at Cosmopolitan Church. What is grief? How would you define grief?
Grief can be defined as several things.
Come closer to your mic.
Well, how about now?
Better.
Right on. Well, to me, grief is the emotional response to a loss of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a thing, it can be a person, it can be, and that it's an emotional response. Depending on the individual, it can go from emotional to being physical. That's my 2 cents.
Did you have anything to add?
I just, I want to say to piggyback on that, and it's a state of being that sometimes people are there and they don't even know, they don't understand that that's where they are. And it doesn't always relate to death. It, like he said, a loss of something or a situation can cause the person to be in a state of grief and they not know it.
So was it appropriate that I flipped out and cried when I lost an earring my mother gave me? Because to me, it was sentimental. And it's, my mother gave it to me. I'm very, sentimental in that regard. Like, I literally bawled and cried. I mean, I got over it, but I had a fit.
Right. It's different for each individual.
Okay.
Based on your background, based on how you were raised, based on your faith. It can manifest itself, and your response will differ based on any wide number of things.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody reacts differently to different things.
Okay. So then what is grief counseling? What is that for? What is the definition of that?
Well, I like to say it's an opportunity for people to come in, whether it be individually or in groups, and express to someone how they're actually feeling without anybody judging them because of how they're feeling. They need to be able to express themselves. However, if you want to sit down and boo-hoo and cry and just have somebody there with you, that's a process of going through grief. If you want to, some people break out in laughter.
Mm-hmm.
Some people get angry. So everybody's reaction is different, but there needs to be an outlet somewhere, either with somebody or something, in order for them to express that and not feel like they're being judged.
What happens if there is no place for someone to go? So no one to talk to, what are some of the ways that this grief can manifest? Because I see it sometimes as displaced anger. Yeah. Well, what are some of the ways? Go ahead.
Well, it's going to there's always some place to go, but it's whether or not that person wants to seek out.
Okay.
Or whether they recognize that some things. I was looking up and doing some basic study. I brought up my cheat notes. But some of the basic symptoms that somebody. I told you grief is an individual thing, but there are some common things that everyone may experience. You may feel physically drained. You can't sleep at night. You're forgetful or unable to think clearly.
Right.
You're noticeably a change in your appetite.
Yeah.
Physical stress such as chest pains, headaches, nausea. You stay extremely busy to avoid thinking about whatever you're grieving over. You may participate in harmful activities. So that can be a number of things depending on you eat, drink, watch television excessively. Senses or dreams about whatever you're grieving over. You know, and then you can become withdrawn, lonely, apathetic, and then you may find yourself frequently sighing and or crying. Those are like some general things.
Yeah. Right. And I experienced, you know, a myriad of this is not the Tasha Grief show, but it is, you know, considering how recent this has been for us as a family, all of those things happen. I know with Daddy, his appetite completely, he's just now really eating. You know, he just didn't feel like it. Like I would kind of make him, like, Daddy, just eat this chicken. I ain't hungry, eat it. You know, that kind of thing. How can one be of best support? So maybe I'm not the person that they should talk to on a professional level, but how can I support someone who is grieving? Because we're fortunate, you know, to have a large family base, a large friend base, a large faith base. That is not everyone's story.
That's true. And you don't, you know what, sometimes you just being there.
Okay.
You don't have to, you know, like maybe somebody needs to call and talk to somebody and they feel like, well, maybe I can call Tasha and talk to her. And all they want to do is talk. And you'd be like, well, I can't get a word in edgewise. You didn't need to get a word in edgewise. They needed to vent. They needed to get all of that, whatever is built up, pent up inside. They need to get it out. So that's right. Somebody might want to call you and they just, the minute you say hello, they start boo-hooing and bawling.
Like
Just-
gas. You got to get it out. Better out than in.
You gotta get it out. You just gotta
That's,
get it out. You know, but however it is that they need you. And like, you know, I had a friend that when I was introducing this and I said, well, you know, I'm going to start this. And at that time I said, I'm going to start this grief. I'm going to do this grief seminar. Oh, I don't need that. I don't need that. But see, that's what do you call it?
Defense
That's
mechanism.
a defense mechanism.
Why do you think people are so defensive about grief?
Because I don't think we take it really seriously, and because of the uncertainty of death. We all experience death on some or a loss of some kind all the time, and it's a internal thing. I'll give you an example. Myself, when my mother made her transition some years back, I was so busy dealing with everything and making sure that everyone else was okay. You know, I'm the youngest, but just going through her funeral, making the arrangements, picking out clothes, you know, jewelry, going back and forth, trying to be a support to my siblings where I could. And I went through the entire process. I don't think that I shed tears until a year later. And I was at the funeral of someone that I didn't know. I was at one of my coworkers' husband's funeral, and I went to support. And you know, all that time I'm thinking I'm okay, I'm fine,
Right.
and I'm getting there. Next, you know, I'm in the corner like. Next, you know, I'm full stream all the way in, and people are looking like he must have really cared about that guy. I had never seen this guy a day in my life. Didn't know him from Adam, you know. And I was like, wow, I didn't know. It had built up, and all of a sudden it came out. Then it happened again that same year on Mother's Day. I'm driving home from work on 294, and they all of a sudden they start playing all them Mama's Day songs.
Wow.
Sadie, all this stuff just back to back.
Yeah.
Shirley Caesar, I Remember Mama. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me, my mother is not here anymore.
Yep.
You know, and after those moments, I got it out and I was okay. but it had never really sank in that my mother was not here. And right now, I think it hits me now, for selfish reasons. Right around the holidays, I'm used to her cooking. I used to drop meals at her house, full meals, and then be able to pick it up later.
Right. Here all the ingredients. Thank you.
Yeah. But it's a part of the process, and I often tell people, there's a process to this thing, and there is no time limit on it, and people can't tell you, oh well, it's been 30 days, you ought to get over it. It's been 5 years, you ought to get over it. No, because just like Pastor was talking about how it hit him, I kind of went through the same thing when my mom, when our mom passed. I was just, like left church. We got the call at church and left church and went, and everybody else, like you said, everybody else, you just taking care of everybody else. You it's kind of almost gets to be robotic. You taking care of everybody else, you making sure everybody else is okay. And I want to say probably about 6-10 months in or something like that, I was in my spare room looking for something, and I picked up a dress that my mother had given me. And I just lost it. I just lost it. And I was like, wow. And then me and my sisters were talking this past Mother's Day, and it seemed like we were all having a rough time this past Mother's Day for some particular reason. And it's been like 13, almost 14 years. So there is no time frame. Right. And I tell people all the time, you have to have some empathy if you've never been there, and sympathy if you can relate. But don't ever tell somebody you need to get over that because you've been going through that too long.
That's horrible.
It really is.
There are those that,
but there are people that tell that.
Yeah. Wow.
Because they may have gotten over it, or they may not have had the relationship that you had
Exactly.
with an individual. And then, as I was really doing some serious study on this topic of grief, you have to know that there's a possibility, depending on your history, depending on your family, your health, and all that, that grief can turn into clinical depression.
Absolutely.
And those are two different things.
Yeah.
Grief typically will run its course, whether it's slower or faster, depending on the individual. But then if there's a history of depression in the family, if you've never experienced death, and this is your first death of someone close to you, there are a number. If you have no support system, no network, if you have prior issues with drug abuse or alcohol abuse or something, there's a great possibility that grief can escalate into, clinical depression.
Or even chemical dependency, particularly if you've had a history and you've gotten clean. Because you want to forget. And I think that sometimes people, abuse something and they've never had a history of whatever. You want to not think about it. In our case, I think this one was different, referencing Uncle Bob, because we've lost aunts and uncles before. Eric lost his mother. She's one of those siblings. But it was a little different because they had been ill. We kind of knew, okay, this is coming. We don't like it, but we can begin to try to wrap our minds around it. Right. But literally, it was 1 week we were with Uncle at his best friend's funeral. And 7 days later, we are rushing across town to the hospital. And so you're right. It's really important that people get the help they need. What if people are resistant to help? What if you see, your friend struggling and he or she is just not interested in fixing it? And it doesn't have to be a loss of persons physically, but maybe the death of a relationship, a divorce or something. I tell the listeners, I went right to counseling when my marriage ended because I wanted to make sure that I was okay.
Right.
Yeah. How can you encourage someone who's resistant?
Pretty much, as the Bible says, testify.
Okay.
Meaning whether it's your testimony or someone else's, and then kind of let them know that you're there. You can even let them know that a lot of these things are normal. If people realize that it's normal, and that whatever they're going through, they aren't alone, that this isn't the first time that it's happened, you know, that you aren't crazy, that you don't have to be the strong one, you don't have to, you know, let it out.
Yeah.
And even if you you think you're okay, go do like they do with your cars. Every now and then you go get that checkup, a tune up. Yeah.
Right. And it's true, because it doesn't matter how strong you are. Everybody has a breaking point. You know, and so you can't and don't, if you see that a person is resistant, don't try to force anything on them. You know, kind of walk it through with them, and like Pastor said, let them know that I'm here, and don't ever make the mistake. I've heard people do this so often. Oh, I know what you're going through.
No, you don't.
And you do not, because you've never experienced what they're going through. You can have empathy for them, but you cannot relate to that and say, somebody that's lost their spouse. I'm not going to tell them I know what you're going through, and my spouse is still walking, breathing, and talking,
and getting on your nerves.
And you know, yours just transition, and I'm gonna tell you, I know how you feel. That's the worst thing a person could do.
And you
or
never
even
know.
a step further. I think we're about to say the same thing, but even if you did lose a spouse like they did, your relationship was not the same as theirs. You may love yours, or you may hate your spouse.
Right. So you're good.
Right.
I've
Some
had
people say, "Good riddance, he gone." You know,
wow.
but
what I generally tell individuals is I've been through the experience, and I don't know how you feel, but I've been through the experience that I've, you know, and then I tell them how I went through the experience.
That testimony piece. I've had friends lately lose their moms, and I reach out and I do what's I call it. You said the maintenance. I do it. I just send a, hey, what's up? I'm checking in. How are you?
exactly.
You know, because my mother and I are going shopping tomorrow, but their mother is gone. So, you know, you want to be empathetic, as you mentioned, but you don't want to discount what they're feeling.
Right.
That's important. So tell me about the grief counseling that's about to start at Cosmopolitan Community Church. Shout out to Cosmopolites. Yay.
Well, go ahead. No, they've had a seminar in the past, but there's nothing been ongoing. And we have a aged, pretty much, congregation.
Okay.
And so I think that there needed to be something put in place for ongoing. And one of the things that really pressed it is I had with one of my members recently. She lost her spouse maybe about 5 years ago. And then she just lost a close friend. And it was like her spouse just re-died all over again. And she shut down. We prayed with her. We were there. It was so fresh to her, and this was the first time I'd seen grief cripple someone, because she's very outgoing, very lovable, likable, always a great support to others. And so when she said, "Pastor, I can't do it. I can't hang. I can't this. I need a week. I need some time off," and she was starting to withdraw, and that was just so unlike her. And so it really laid on my heart. So I'd been praying, and then I encouraged different ones to reach out to her. In addition to me, and we prayed, and then even one of the things that I mentioned earlier, her faith, and then having her church family around her, that's what helped her to cross that hurdle. And she said, "I'm back, Pastor." When we were streaming, she would comment on the messages and the sermons, and she would love this and the Word of God. In addition to having the different church members reach out, supporting her, that helped her to get through that thing. Now, my thing, I want to have something in place so that she'll have some coping tools before she needs them. Because who's to say if someone else should transition or something else should happen, that she won't fall back into that thing. And not just her, there are others.
So we were talking about it. I had been invited to a group session for caregivers, and I didn't even realize that I really fit that category because my husband had been sick. And I was like, this ministered to me. And then when I shared it with Pastor, he was like, you know what? We were just talking about something like this, and we need this. So I just took what I already had and put a packet and gave it to Pastor for him to go over and see what he thought about it. And it's basically scripture based, but it entails all the things that we've talked about previously, and just helping people get through that process, because
Right.
it is a process, and it's an ongoing process.
Grief hits in waves.
It
I would
does.
find myself going, and because this is the most fresh experience, that's why I'm kind of referencing this most recent thing. But much like Eric was saying, when Auntie Dottie died, his mom, he was busy, and I was busy handling, the things that my cousin Rita asked me to handle. And I kept viewing it like, oh, family gathering. When we finally finished the service, of course we were sad during the service. We got back to my parents' house for the family repast. And then we were sitting around. We were sitting outside. And I looked around, and Uncle wasn't there. Out of all of these men, he was, and I lost it. But, now I'm trying not to set Daddy off. So I go in the den, and, my cousin, Reggie, came to check in. What's going on? I'm like, it just don't seem right. It's just, it's not right. And so it hits in those waves. And then other times I'm cracking up laughing at the video of us dancing or him giving Rita away.
Right.
So it does hit in waves, and you do need those coping skills. When is our grief program at Cosmopolitan going to launch?
Well, we're working on it right now. The goal is to have something in place at least by October.
Okay.
And then I want to do something at least quarterly, so that way you can, something ongoing, and it won't be just open to it won't be just be closed to Cosmopolitan members. It'll be open to everyone. I want us to be a blessing to our surrounding community, whoever you are.
Right.
And one thing about grief and the sense of loss that I've learned, and this is one of the things I tell people personally when I counsel and reference scriptures, is that don't expect it to ever end. It just gets easier. It never goes away.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think because some people may go into it thinking eventually I'll reach a point where it doesn't hurt anymore. No, it just doesn't hurt as much.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's true. It doesn't. And that was something I was thinking about on the way over here, is that it's a part of the process, but the process just gets easier, not that the process ends. And, you can, like you said, it does. It's like a roller coaster, and it's okay. People think, well, what's wrong with me? I was doing fine. And then all of a sudden, but it's okay. It's part of the process. And you never know how it's going to come. Like I said, you might cry today, laugh tomorrow. You might get mad next week. You might be outside. You want to just, all of a sudden, you find yourself, you want to throw something.
That's actually advice I gave to a friend who lost her daughter. And I posted about dreaming about my late brother. And so she saw that, and she, reached out to me privately and said, how did you get past it? I said, I didn't. I deal with it. I said, when I dreamed about him that day, that night, that morning, whatever it was, it brought it all back fresh. I said, but if you need to scream, cry, throw stuff, possibly not hit anybody, but channel that energy into something. For her, she has a business. I recommended that she name one of her product lines after her daughter. How important is channeling that energy? Because you don't want to be so busy that you don't deal with the process. But how healthy, or is it healthy to channel that energy into something productive?
It is. I can give you something how I've noticed that the Cloptons as a whole handle grief.
Okay.
Humor.
I'm sure that the
No.
the ICU unit thought we were crazy.
I mean, we have a good time. We're grieving now, and it's deep grieving, but we handle it with humor. We go in with one another. We look at instances. I'll give you an example. So this had to be one of the funniest ones. So one of my uncles had made his transition. And so we had my uncle Buster, who was blind. And so we were all at the funeral home. And you know how they do the final review? Mm-hmm. Well, this funeral home, all of my mother's siblings were on the front row. And they brought the casket to the front. No, they didn't. They didn't take the casket to the front row. They took each individual up to the casket one at a time.
Okay.
So they're going down the line. And all of a sudden, my brother, his head is down, and his shoulders are just going because he's on the side of me. And I look at it, and I'm thinking, well, he's really hurt at this moment because it's the final review, and tears are coming down. And then my other brother started doing the same thing. I'm like, oh, it's really getting bad. And then we like, what's wrong? And they pointed up there, and we saw they were getting to my blind uncle, and they took him up there, and he's pretending he could see his dead sibling. He stood there like he knew what he was doing. It was he was being funny. And then after he got all over, he was like, yeah. The funeral director really thought he could see. Wow. But we all lost it, and we after at the repast, we're laughing all about it. We're going in on it. That's one instance. Another instance was we were at I think one of my aunt's funerals, and my two brothers were sitting down, and I walk up and they're like, "No, you can't sit over here with us." I'm looking like, they're like, "No, you can't sit over here with us." And then my other brother, like, "You gotta let him sit down. This funeral be dead without him." And then the lady who's sitting in the front of us turned around. "Y'all must be Dottie's boys." In our family, we deal with grief through humor, and it alleviates. It helps.
Yeah. It's various ways now. Like one of the things that our family started to do, we were getting together because it's something that we did often with my mom. We would have family gatherings at each other's houses. Well, 2 years ago, we decided, my sister brought this idea, and she said, why don't we had a conference call. She said, why don't we do something in honor of Medea? We're like, okay, well, my mother loved to travel. So what do? We started every 2 years, we picked some place abroad. They went to the first year, 2 years ago, they went to Puerto Vallarta. This year, we went to Cabo San Lucas. And then we sit around, and like they had a reception for us, and so we sit around and reminisce. Mm-hmm. and laugh and talking, like you said, because my mother used to do things. My mother used to sit around. We used to sit around at night, and she used to tell us stories about the South that was scared by the death. Didn't nobody want to go to bed.
Right.
Talk about all of the stuff that used to come out. And so we reminisce and stuff like that. And it, we laugh. Sometimes we cry, but it's all a good way of expressing how we feel, mm-hmm. and what we think. So everybody can come up with something creative to do, for as far as expressing that. So that way, when you're talking about how people react, it won't come out in the wrong way at the wrong time, mm-hmm. against the wrong person,
right.
who has nothing to do with it, has no idea what's wrong with you.
Exactly. And I think that's a good place to end. We talked about the different stages, the ways we can cope, and that one is really good to channel it into something productive that gives you an opportunity to reminisce. Give us the contact information for Cosmopolitan. Clearly, I know it, but Pastor Eric?
Well, we're Cosmopolitan Community Church located on the corner of 53rd and Wabash. The exact address would be 5249 South Wabash, Chicago, Illinois 60615. You can find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube, on Twitter,
and Instagram. I heard that your media director was great. I heard.
As much as I want to cut her, she is outstanding and phenomenal. I am just amazed.
Yes, we love her.
You know, I give her accolades behind her back all the time. I don't just couldn't tell her to her face. It might go to her head or something.
Clearly, I'm the media
people in
director.
California love her too.
Yeah, all right. Bless the Lord.
I mean, when I look at what, and this is all her, but when I look at what we produce and what's the product that's put out, and I compare it to some of the things that I see on television by various other churches and so-called ministries, I'm proud, godly proud of what God is doing through our media ministry at Cosmopolitan.
Indeed. I'm down with that. Go Jesus.
Yes.
So, Cosmopolitan Community Church winter services for people who may just want to visit.
Every Sunday morning we start at promptly 10:45. We don't do church all day, but we do effective and powerful ministry. We have youth church, which happens every second and fourth Sunday. Same time that our regular service is going on, beginning at 10:45. And then we have Bible studies, 2 on Wednesdays, one from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. And then our evening Bible study happens from 7 to 8:30 p.m. But prior to evening Bible study, we have prayer going on, intercessory prayer that's happening from 6 to 7.
Amen. All right. Well, we appreciate you being a part of a Vibrant Mix this week. Shout out to Fred and Tamiko in their absence. They had a lot of things going on, and we completely and totally understand. Don't forget to like a Vibrant Mix on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on YouTube. And don't forget to check us out weekly for new episodes. We will catch you next week.
Bye.